Go. Everybody, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday evening. Hope you're having a great week, such as it is so far. Um, Mine was going really well until about 6 minutes ago when I went to, wow, did you guys see that? I'm sitting right by the bird bath, and I'm guessing a dove might have wanted to come in for a little drinky wink before bed, because who doesn't? And I think we startled each other. Anyway, so I had a couple show and tell things planned for you. Actually, I had a whole cup for one of the show and tells, and as you can see, it's still kind of wet on the inside. There's some yes, nose prints on the inside here. So I was going to talk to you. I was going to talk a little bit about something I learned this week about cicadas. I had in this cup a dead cicada. I believe it was a dog day cicada. I found it laying on the grass in the backyard here the other day. I had 3 cast exoskeletons from cicadas who climbed up and split out of their shells and transferred into their adult stage. And then I had also a cicada nymph still in its shell. I found it on the sidewalk the other day, and it was dead, but it had clearly come up out of the ground. It had dried mud on it and everything. I thought that was going to be a really cool thing to talk about too. Well, when I got this cup out of the car yesterday, I noticed all the cicada shells and the dead cicadas were in there, but then there were these 2 other things. And at first I thought, oh, it's mouse poop, 2 mouse poops. And then I thought, oh, those are kind of big for mouse poops. Specifically the diameter seemed a little bit too large for a mouse. And I know I didn't have any chipmunks. This was in the Park District van, which interestingly enough, I had just had, and the guys had to service it last week because mice had chewed on what was it, the brake cables, not through the brake line, but one of the sensors that indicates the brake light had come on, and turns out the brakes were fine, but the wires weren't because the mice had chewed on them. Anyway, so I was sort of thinking mice, and then I looked at these things. What they were fly pupa. So either the dead adult cicada or the dead nymph that was in there had been parasitized by a fly. We've got tachinid flies. We've got I learned about another group of flies, the sarcophagy. Oh, I should have written it down. But it's a type of fly that sometimes lays eggs on dead things and sometimes lays eggs on live things. Anyway, something had laid eggs, and its larvae had fed on these dead cicadas that were in here. And I was going to tell you this whole cool story about how really nothing in nature is immune from being part of that great circle of life. Well, when I went to set up the light here, so we could get our program underway, and when I went to grab the cup, it was empty, because I think it was furry roommate number 2, Kit, who really cannot resist eating anything that she can fit in her mouth. This has got her doggy slobber inside of it, and it is completely empty. So shed skins, dead cicadas, and fly pupa all gone. But it is super cool. I urge you to do some more investigating on your own. When you find a dead cicada in your yard, maybe put it in a cup, put a lid on it, and see what comes out of it, because yeah, it's gonna be food for something. I've up till this point, I'd been aware of how ants will use cicadas as food. When these guys are done up in the trees, they drop down to the ground. The females especially still have a lot of protein on their bodies. And boy, the ants are just all over them, using that leftover energy to make their own bodies work. So anyway, sorry about that. If I can recreate that thing, but while we're still in cicada season, I will. But for now, Kit is going to get a few less kibbles in her dish for dinner tonight because she's already had a pretty good snack. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you was this book here. It's I think they call it a young readers or maybe young adult book. It's called A Nest for Celeste, a story about art, inspiration, and the meaning of home. And you'll see Celeste here is a little mousy. In fact, on the back cover here, it's got a little, not really a review, Julie Andrews endorses the book. She says, I have long been an admirer of Henry Cole's contribution to children's literature. With his first novel, he weaves a tale that, in addition to delightful illustrations, has all the best ingredients, a succession of history, time-honored themes, and just the right amount of imagination. So what this is, it's about a little mouse who goes in search of a home. She gets ousted from one home by some rats. But I love the way there's a fair amount of words on some of the pages, but there are also a lot of really awesome illustrations as Celeste goes in search of a new place that she can call home. Well, there's a couple pages without any pictures at all. But wonderful illustrations. I have not finished the book yet, so I can't give my full review, but it is it's been captivating enough that I have it on my bedside table, and I look forward to reading a few pages every night. You might ask, well, why are we talking about kids' books? Not so much children's literature. The point here is the mouse that this literature is about, because this is our little segue into tonight's slides. Let's see, let's go. Let's share here. Share here. Gonna go to slideshow for tonight. So here's a little peek inside my world. This is a garage. That's my motorcycle. And this was a few weeks ago now. I had come home after work. So the motorcycle left at about 9 o'clock in the morning. It came home about 6 o'clock at night that day. And as I was getting off of it, I saw a mousie run what looked like down the front forks here. And I thought, did I really see that? And then it kind of ran. I was standing here. It ran around my feet and disappeared. Well, I didn't think too much of it at the time. I've got garage mice, and other than one time when they chewed into my car when I had some birdseed that contained peanuts, they've really been pretty good little guests. If one, usually a teenage one, tries to come into the house, my cat Jimmy, one of the other furry roommates, will take care of it. And I am planning some point in the future to have some work done in the garage where they probably won't be able to get in at all. So right now, they come, they go. And we just kind of coexist. I went in the house and let the dogs out, brought the dogs in, realized I still had time to mow the grass. So I came back down, and when I looked at the motorcycle again, I thought, wait a minute, what's that on the floor? Can you see? There's something here, and there's something over here. There's something behind the kickstand too. You know what those somethings are? Mousies. So, apparently I have been riding around with a mouse nest inside my motorcycle. Now, this bike, it's arranged a little bit differently as compared to most bikes, where the gas tank, normally most tanks are up here. Well, this bike, the gas tank is actually underneath the seat, and up here is an open well. The underneath this panel is how you access the battery, but there's a lot of open space in this part of the bike. Apparently, Miss Mousy had decided to make a nest in the bike. I didn't know it. I drove it, parked it at work all day. She must have sat there with her little family. And then when I got back home that night, she got the heck out of there. But then her babies started to, get a little agitated when mom left. Well, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to let this little scene play out. I went and I mowed the grass, and when I came back, all the mousies were back. Well, I think they might be underneath the snowblower, because that seems to be where mom disappeared. I haven't checked there to see. That machine is probably going to be going out on the curb, especially if we don't get much snow again this winter. But anyway, that got me reading more about mice and how they live. And then somehow, from one connection to another, I found out about a nest for Celeste. If you or someone you know is a teacher, or if you kids, I think this book is rated for ages like, I don't know, 8 to 12 or something, something in that range, depending on reading aptitude. It's a really cute little book, and like I said, I can't wait to read a few pages every night. A nest for Celeste. By the way, this takes place in the 1800s, so she's not nesting in a motorcycle. I know that. Okay, so oh, this was, I forgot, I took this picture after I mowed the grass. You'll notice if we zoom in here underneath the motorcycle, no more mousies, because mom came and hauled them away. And yeah, they probably lived happily ever after there underneath the snowblower. All right, so let's what else did we do this week? Oh, so we could play a little game here of guess what's in the box. We could zoom in a little bit. You can see there's things wrapped up. This was actually an insulating blanket that flopped open when the box ripped when I picked it up. But we've got something wrapped tightly in plastic here. It's got a long neck head. It's got a long bill on the front of its head. It's got some long legs coming out the back over here. It's actually curled up with its friend next to it that you might be able to identify here. If we zoom in some more, its friend has some plumes on its head. Yes, this was a trip to the taxidermist. We have a sandhill crane right here. The unfortunate victim of a motor vehicle accident over by Nelson Lake Marsh. Can't remember if it was March or April when that occurred, but the gentleman who actually had the cranes feeding in his yard almost every day, when only one showed up one morning, he went out searching and found this crane in actually in really good shape, other than it must have had some internal injuries or something, because it was not alive anymore, but visible broken bones or anything. So we thought that might make a cool taxidermied addition to the nature center. And then the great blue heron was something too that had been donated a while back. A gentleman just found the heron dead in his backyard pond. So thanks to a couple of recommendations from friends, I found out if there's a taxidermist still in the area. I heard that this gentleman retired, but that is not the case. It is, oh, and by the way, this paperwork here, this is, I had to show that we are allowed to do salvage. So on top there, that's our federal permit from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And then below that was a copy of our Illinois Department of Natural Resources salvage permit. So we could transport these birds legally. And then I gave copies to the taxidermist who works here. Isn't that not just something you don't see every day. I had such sensory overload. And actually, sensory would imply that it smells. It didn't smell at all, but there was just so much to look at there. I mean, there's certainly a lot of deer, pretty much ringing this front room here. But look at here's a squirrel that's all dressed up. Here's what is that? Is that an owl? No, that's some other little creature. Um, a statue, of course, a freezer. I don't know. There was a cat who was just the friendliest little thing. Meowed and was rubbing up on my legs pretty much the whole time I was there. Your assorted African herbivores over here, raccoon. It was just, and the guy, so this is Vern's Taxidermy up in Algonquin. Vern was actually unable to be there today, so that day, so he sent his associate Glenn in. That Glenn called this morning saying he picked up a dead cormorant by the side of the road and would be glad to prepare that for us too, if we should be interested. Ducks. Here's an opossum head mount. It was really, really entertaining, educational. We talked a lot about different types of wildlife in the area. It was just, well worth the time. I'd actually had a program up in Barrington, so coming back to Algonquin wasn't really even out of the way. But just another facet of life in the nature education business. Oh, I wonder if you can see. No, I don't. Oh yeah, down here. Let me zoom in. They had just finished, and I should have moved in closer here. They had the most awesome beaver mount right here. This thing had been, I don't know if it was hit by a car or if it had been trapped out of a pond somewhere, but the work was impressive too. It wasn't just that there was a lot of it, but it's all very, very nicely done too. Up there at Vern's Taxidermy in Algonquin, Illinois. Oh, crappies. Yeah, like I said, everywhere you look, something cool to catch your eye. So let's jump ahead a few days. Last Thursday evening was our annual eco float on a riverboat where we take one of the paddle wheel boats out at Potawatomi, and we cruise for about an hour. We go up and then down the Fox River. Well, as we were actually doing a sound check because they had gotten some new microphones on board. I happened to look out, and those of you who are in the area, you might have noticed the preponderance of lilies. These are water lilies. I believe they are all the same species, the white or fragrant water lily. It is an Illinois native, but it is found exactly what it likes in the silty, shallow areas of the Fox River. I think as we get more and more silt built up behind the dam, there's just more and more habitat for these plants. Well, growing right in the middle was something I hadn't seen before. We zoom in here, we can see it has a kind of an attractive flower. I guess I didn't get it in focus very well, but it was quite eye-catching. There was another blossom elsewhere on the plant. Oh, here. That one, it almost looked like a big pink firework that was growing there in the river. I thought, well, what in the world is this little gem? Well, it turns out it's not a gem at all. It is an invasive species called flowering rush, Butomus umbellatus, and it is listed on the Great Lakes invasive species plants of concern. I'm not exactly sure of the source. Usually these water plants, they come in they call it the bilge water, the water that boats use to make the boat heavier. It might have come in attached to something. But anyway, it's growing right next to the boat docks at Potawatomi. I will probably say something to our restoration crew to see if they've encountered it anywhere else. Because it's probably something we want to nip sooner rather than later, especially since it has been identified as a Great Lakes invader. Want to get ahead of this one before we start seeing flowering rushes, even though it's pretty. You know how these things work. They tend to have a lot of flowers, which produce a lot of seeds, which produce a lot of plants, which then crowd out things that we are supposed to be seeing in this area. And then there was the walk at West Chicago Prairie. I have to tell you, this is a local gem in terms of both plant diversity and animal diversity. It's kind of hard to see the animals though because of all the plants. I believe there are a few threatened and endangered species that live at this prairie, particularly when we're talking about reptiles. And as you park, so this is on the far west side of West Chicago. So local folks, if you know where Hawthorne is in West Chicago, there's another street called Industrial. I can't remember if it's Industrial Street or Industrial Boulevard, but the entrance to West Chicago Prairie, the main entrance with the parking lot and the trail maps such as they were, and little porta-john, which you can just see peeking through the plants here. That's you enter in off of Industrial, and it starts off with this, gosh, this has to be what, 6 feet wide, this very well-maintained crushed lime trail, but it quickly turns into just the narrowest of paths. Can you see that, right? That break in the plants right there. Which, it's nice. It's sometimes I think park districts and forest preserves, they overgroom a trail, and you'll have a trail that's 6 feet wide and then it's mowed 3 feet on either side, and it can really distance you from what you're there to see. But in this case, there was quite a bit of bushwhacking that had to be done to move our way through what was, I think we did like, I don't know, 0.7 miles in something like an hour and 15 minutes. It's not the sort of place that you'll just, whip through, but it's slow going, not so much. I mean, a little bit, because you have to watch where you're going and you have to make sure you're staying on this so-called path, but also there's so much to see. This is an area, we'll get back to this in a second. This is a plant called gray dogwood that could use a little management. Gray dogwood is a native, but it produces a lot of berries, and those berries, of course, have seeds in them. And we've actually planted it and then removed it from several of the St. Charles natural areas, because I think it does well in an area where it can be controlled, or in an area where it can be allowed to just grow freely, because it will dominate over time. Here's another area. So here's the trail. There's actually a little gap here in the vegetation. This was a little grove of sumac trees that were growing. It was nice to be in some shade going there in the prairie. There were also these trees here, which here's the sumac, but then if we look, hanging like little jewels, little round orbs on this plant. This is an American plum tree. The skin of the American plum is kind of tough, but the fruit is delectable. It's got the soft flesh like you'd expect, like you expect from a plum, like what you might find in a fresh farmer's market plum. So the fruits that were ripe were really nice and sweet. There's a pit inside. I thought about bringing some home to try and start, but then I didn't. not supposed to remove anything from a forest preserve, so I left the pit there. But um, there were certainly plenty of plums to snack on. There was also a lot of blackberries that were quite ripe. Some plants, it was interesting, some were quite sweet and others were pretty tart, even though they look to be the same degree of ripeness. So you won't go hungry if you go for a walk at West Chicago Prairie. Here's the picture of those dogwood berries up close. Again, it's gray dogwood. Birds love these berries. If you've got a space that you want to have fill in quickly, this would be a plant that would do that. It doesn't have necessarily but it will certainly fill in and provide lots and lots of food and lots of cover for our local wildlife. Now, on Saturday, so this is a look at the Fox River. This is just south, just downstream from the pedestrian bridge here in downtown St. Charles. And this was at the start of our Rusty Rodeo 2023. This is the event that we partner with the Fox Valley Park District and Red Oak Nature Center, as well as the Forest Preserve District of Kane County and Creek Bend Nature Center. The St. Charles location was just St. Charles and Friends of the Fox River. We had Gary Swick and several of his dedicated volunteers there to help out. And then down at Glenwood Park in Batavia, that's where the Forest Preserve District and Fox Valley / Red Oak people were. Down there, they had over 300 people, and they caught, they've started weighing their catches there as opposed to counting them. And they had over 30 pounds of rusty crayfish when they were done. Up here in St. Charles, we're still in the process of tallying. I had to leave early. So I know we were over 1,000 crayfish, and we were at about 150 people for the day. So again, a good turnout. And a great way to help control, or not control, but try and reduce the numbers of the invasive rusty crayfish. Interestingly enough, there was so much going on that day that I actually did not take a picture of a rusty crayfish on Saturday. I got this crowd shot, and this is a wad of fishing line that had a lure in the middle of this plant mass. As much as we were there to get the rusties out, it was nice too to get we had a lot of fishing line pulled out, as well as some other interesting bits of trash. You never know what the fox is gonna give up. The water levels, this was before yesterday's rain, so the levels of the water were nice and low. You can see there's a rocky bar out here that people were just, any rock you picked up, you had crayfish underneath it. And once again, as was the case last year, we didn't find a single native species. They were all rusty crayfish. It's absolutely stunning. Well, I noticed as people were arriving for the event, there were a few people who were starting to go in the river over here on the opposite side. So this is on the west bank of the Fox River. Over here on the eastern shoreline, I saw a couple of kids get let out of a car, and they started to go down into the water here. And I said, oh, you know what, guys, you need to check in over on the west side. And then I happened to look down the water, and can you see who was down there? This is another reason to maybe not go looking for rusty crayfish at that particular moment in time. It's got a funny posture, but it was not dead. This was very much alive. This was a big old snapping turtle. I wouldn't exactly say it's in the same size class as the Chunkosaurus, that snapping turtle that was making headlines a month or two ago, but it very, very good, good size. I think I've got another one here. I would say from the front of the shell to the back here, we were probably talking about maybe 15 inches, maybe 18 inches. Good size snapper. It's so hard. I just use my little cell phone camera. And I'm not an accomplished photographer at all. I was trying to get a picture of the snapper without getting the reflection of the clouds. And I didn't really succeed, but look at it. It turned its head and was looking up like, excuse me, this is my side of the river. You go stick to your own side. And I don't know, it was pulling pretty intently at something there in the water. I couldn't see, here it just looks like rocks, but there was definitely something there that had its interest. And it was no doubt kind of keeping careful watch over. I don't know, is it that pink stuff there, or is that a reflection too? I don't know. There was something delicious, at least in terms of snapping turtle tastes, that was right there on the east side of the river. Now, oh, and then this was so fun. Yesterday, I made a trip out to DeKalb. I have not visited this retirement community before. It's a place called Oak Crest. And the newspaper column that I write every week appears in the DeKalb County Chronicle. And I hear from a lot of people in DeKalb, probably more so than even in Kane County. Lots of ardent nature observers out there. And this was a woman. She had emailed me during the pandemic just to say how she enjoyed reading the column. They felt very isolated there because the building was shut down to visitors. And she looked forward to a time when she'd be able to go outside again. Well, that time is here now. And there was another woman there who had been given a couple of monarch butterflies to release. So we took them outside, and it was just so fun. There was maybe, I don't know, the group I spoke to yesterday, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 6 of them came outside afterwards, and they let these monarchs go. I'm going to see if this video will play for us. Sometimes these load and sometimes they don't, but it was getting warmed up, I hope. Give it a chance. The other one took them up. But you can see this is actually a male. He's got the enlarged spots there on the veins on his back. And it's funny, you let these butterflies go, and invariably they head for trees. So this one pretty quickly headed up. Well, maybe it made a victory lap there, but it did go into that. I think that was an ornamental crab tree there, and it was really fun to see the looks on these people's faces, to see the freedom on the as they watch the butterfly fly away. And it is that time of year. This is actually one of the super generations of monarch butterflies. When the monarchs, as they return, so we generally start seeing them here in June. I think they were kind of late this year because of, no doubt, the drought might have slowed things down. But it's that generation then has another generation. And then that generation produces this super generation that will make the trip to Mexico. These but monarchs are a little bit different than their parents, because these butterflies have an increased capacity for fat storage that starts when they're a caterpillar, and they retain it as an adult. They are able to hold more fat on their body so that they can fly long distances. These are the insects that will fly all the way down to Mexico. Just a mind-blowing feat to have these little paper-like wings to carry them all the way down into the mountains outside of Mexico City. where they'll spend the winter. Now, they are not the insects that return in the spring. The migration back north is a series where the monarchs that overwintered will fly a short distance, they'll lay some eggs, and then they'll die. And then those monarchs will fly farther north, and then they will lay some eggs and die. And then see, I think it's the generation after that then arrives back here in Illinois in usually mid-June or so. Anyway, it's that time of year. Won't be too much longer, and these butterflies will be massing to head south. Can you believe it? It's already the middle of August. Now, let's stay with our lepidopteran friends for a little bit. And Mike, I have to thank you for this. This was a find this morning here in the neighborhood. This is a white-marked tussock moth. They're really cool looking. Yes, and that's tech support puppy in the background. That's the new turtle enclosure that I built for my box turtle Arthur. We might do a little feature on that sometime once he's moved in there. But anyway, here is a different angle on the tussock moth, white marked tussock moth caterpillar. It's got a really bright head, bright red head. It's got red spots on its back. Before I let it go, I did a little Google, and it turns out, let's go over here. This is Bug Guide. This actually shows what the adult looks like. It is, I love some of these common names, the rusty vapor moth. The caterpillar has a pretty broad range of plants that it feeds on. Let's go down here. Let's see, caterpillars feed on a wide range of hardwood trees and conifers, apple, birch, black locust, cherry, elm, hackberry, hickory, oak, rose, willow. And then it goes into the conifers too: fir, hemlock, larch, spruce. So yeah, it's a generalist. It will feed on a lot of different things. So it's something that is going to be good at surviving. It doesn't rely on just a single food source or a family of plant foods. It can feed on a lot of different things. So I looked that up and I thought, oh, I've got hackberry. I've got lots of hackberry. And I set it down. Now, sometimes these caterpillars, if they have grown up on one of those hosts, they won't always switch readily over to a different host. But this little one took some test bites. This is a hackberry that I'm probably going to be cutting down at some point. It's not growing in a great location, and I have a couple other hackberries I let get out of control. But it settled in and started munching away, and for all I know is still munching there. You might have noticed on the Bug Guide page, they talk about the hairs on the back. Contact with hairs may cause an allergic reaction. Whenever you handle a fuzzy caterpillar like this, there's a good chance those hairs are there as a defense, as a means of protecting itself from getting eaten. But I let it crawl on my hand, but I didn't try to pet it. That's generally a good practice, even with our cuddly little woolly bears. Handling them can sometimes lead to I don't know if they call it contact dermatitis, but it's it can form a little rash. To me, it feels like a for these guys, like you've got a little bit of what am I trying to think of? Fiberglass, like from insulation, little shards in your fingers. Some people it can be worse depending on their sensitivity. So, today I was visiting a retirement community up in South Elgin, and when I walked out, I heard a lot of commotion. And a couple months ago, the staff had said, "Oh yeah, there's a lot of birds that hang out on that cell tower." Now, I think I've mentioned before uh, the hobby of looking at cell towers for raptor nests. In particular, osprey seem to really like to nest on cell towers. So this being about maybe a mile or so from the Fox River, I've always kept an eye on it, thinking maybe an osprey might like to live there. Well, this today was not an osprey. See if this video will play. Oops, let me put the sound on. This is one we want to sound. You can see. Uh-oh. Let's try it again. I thought I did a good job of capturing the petulant whining of the there's a young red tail. There were actually two young red tails, but I only saw one up on the top of the tower. This is the time of year when mom and dad are trying to back away and encourage their uh, little lovelies to start feeding on their own. And I don't know, I didn't see any parents approach this one. At this point, they can't really be considered abandoned. It's that part in the life where we're getting close to fall. The parents do not want to have to share their home territory with their offspring. There's going to come a day when uh, this year's young are going to have to head out into the cold, cruel world on their own and make their way. And this bird today was having no part of it. And it really bums me out that you can't hear it. It actually sounded like a gull. They don't sound so much like that. That long drawn out whistle of a mature red tail. It to me it sounds a lot like a gull. It's very repetitive, and there were two of them. One up here on the tower, one I think was in a tree, waiting for mom and dad to bring them something delicious. Oh well. So this is another not so great shot, but it is a really great bumblebee. This is actually a little bit of a sneak preview too. Today I had the good fortune to go out with our friend Valerie, who was the former manager of nature programs for the Forest Preserve District. Well, she also she does a lot of things in her spare time, but one of those is volunteering for a citizen science effort called Bee Spotter. And it basically asks you to go out and spot bees. It's run through the University of Illinois. And Valerie said it is a tremendous way to learn about local bees. She said, even when she sends in a bee that is misidentified, she says that it's a valuable learning experience. They are very good about commenting on any submissions they receive, and if it's correct, great. And if it's not, they're very helpful in giving out pointers of how to make a correct identification. Well, Valerie is pretty certain that this is, let me move this out of the way here. This is the American bumblebee, which you've probably heard about the rusty patch bumblebee and how it is a federally endangered species. Well, American bumblebees, there's not so many of them either. They aren't federally listed, but they are a fairly rare species. And we saw a few of these. Now, how do they differ from the average bumblebee? In our area here, Northern Illinois, I think what we would call average or typical or most common for the area would be the eastern or common bumblebee, Bombus impatiens. This is Bombus pennsylvanicus, and it's got a lot of yellow on its abdomen. If we zoom in, and again, this is not so great picture, but you can see 1, 2, 3 segments here on the abdomen are covered with fuzzy yellow. There's quite a bit of yellow up here too. Valerie had a much better camera and is much more experienced at taking bumblebee pictures. She's actually going to be a guest here on Good Natured, not next week, which would be the 22nd, but the following week. Valerie is going to be presenting on Bee Spotter on Tuesday, August 29th. So mark your calendars there. That also reminds me, I need to get some fall dates loaded, and we have not done that yet. So those of you who are looking ahead, we have not loaded dates for September through December, but we'll get on that. I'll ask our marketing department to do that. But yeah, super cool. This was at Otter Creek Bend this afternoon. I was doing some program prep up there. Valerie came over with her camera and documented this, as well as I want to say shoot, I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it was a what they call a cuckoo bee. And cuckoo bees, there's different kinds, but they will parasitize a species of actual social bumblebee. And she thought that earlier in our walk she had seen the cuckoo that parasitizes the American bumblebee, and then we found an American bumblebee. So could very well have been that we found it. And it's the species that parasitizes it. So cool, again, how all these things always fit together. This is gray-headed coneflower, and there were some other cool things that we saw too. This is a cone, no, I'm sorry, this is cup plant. And it was hosting a lot of these beetles. This is a blister beetle. Wasn't able to figure out exactly what kind of blister beetle it was, but blister beetles, they actually carry a chemical inside of them that they can release, and depending on your sensitivity and just how direct of a hit it was, it can produce some irritation on your skin. So did not touch the blister beetle, but took some nice photos of it. It was not acting defensively at all. And in fact, I believe it was sipping nectar from this cup plant. It is, we're approaching, or we probably pretty much are in the midst of the peak of the yellow part of the prairie season. These are the cup plants, but the sunflowers, the false sunflowers, the other silphium, like the prairie dock and compass plant, everything is nearing its peak blooming time. And it's a really wonderful time to go out and walk on a prairie. And today was particularly wonderful because it was cool out. Sometimes you get a hot August day and you're out in the prairie, which by definition has no trees, so therefore no shade. And it can be pretty brutal. It gives you a real appreciation for what our pioneer ancestors must have gone through to come out here to the prairie state. But it is very cool time to go exploring in the local prairie. This is, did I mention where we were? Otter Creek Bend. Otter Creek Bend is a mitigated wetland, but it has a significant portion of prairie on the north end. So this is bordered on the north by Silver Glen Road for local folks. Otter Creek Bend is out on Crane Road. So yeah, great time to go out and explore. Otter Creek Bend is also, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. This is where the Vandals paid a visit back, I think this was either June or July. Funny part about this little incident was that the fire Fox River Countryside Fire Department responded, and then they filed a report and let the officials at the Forest Preserve District know, because the fire department thought this was Forest Preserve land, not Park District. So when we found out about it, it was probably 2 weeks after the actual fire had occurred. So our supervisor started doing a little checking to see, why it was that we hadn't none, because our maintenance crews at the park district are supposed to be checking these outhouses regularly, 2 or 3 times a week. And when he did some digging, he found out that the supervisor of the maintenance crew said, he looked at the checklist and he said, yeah, absolutely, our guys have been there 3 days this week. They checked the toilet paper, they checked the hand sanitizer, they made sure the lock was working, floors were clean, all the things that are on the checklist. The only problem was this had been burned down for the last 2 weeks. So somebody maybe was stretching the truth a little bit there in the maintenance division. Anyway, it is still nowhere. It has been cleaned up. There's no plans for replacement. I'm sure it will at some point. But the reason I took this picture was because a couple of people on our ecological restoration crew had told me that garter snakes were using the pit of this former pit toilet as a place to hang out. It's cool, it's dark, it's damp, probably got everything a snake could want in the middle of summer. Well, I went over, and I was not the only one. I did not push down the snow fence. Some other people had already, and there were candy wrappers and things like that. I think this is kind of a curiosity for people who come to visit Otter Creek Bend. So I went over, I looked in the holes, didn't see anything that looked like snakes. Like I said, I saw candy wrappers and other, litter. But I did put a couple of dead branches down in the pits, just in case there were snakes there that had gone down to check it out and then found themselves unable to get out. Snakes are pretty good at climbing branches. So the hope is that any that were down there that didn't want to be now have a way to get out. Well, Valerie and I, we walked around, we looked at the flowers, we looked at the bees, we looked at the other insects, and then we came back over here. I said, just out of curiosity, let's take another peek, see if any snakes have climbed up on those branches. And we didn't see any snakes there, but when we started moving these timbers around, we found all kinds of garter snakes hanging out under these boards. So the class I'm teaching on Friday, it's for the Master Naturalist program. And one of the reasons I went to Otter Creek Bend was to see if any of the cover boards, the snake boards that we put out to do surveys of the snake populations there, I wanted to see if any of those were accessible. And they really aren't. They're, it'd be Chigger Central to try and bushwhack over to where those cover boards are. But this might make a nice little substitute. It's a place to go and check out where those snakes are hiding. Now, as I left the park, can you see? I just love it when this happens, and it happens several times a year. Seeing the cranes along Crane Road. We've got guessing Mama, Papa, and I bet you this is little Junior here in the middle. This is very near St. Pat's Church. And it's, just kind of a cool thing. I believe Crane Road was not named after Sandhill Cranes. It was named after the Crane family of the Crane plumbing fixture fortune. But cranes on Crane Road, always worth noting. Got just a couple more things here, folks. Mike, again, I have to thank you. You gave us the gift of the caterpillar earlier, and these are some photos. wonderful photos of the ruby-throated hummingbird visiting the nectar feeder in Mike's yard. You'll notice, though, it's not a ruby throat, is it? And it's a ruby-throated hummingbird. That's the predominant species we have here in northern Illinois at this time of the year. But you know, when the light is a little bit different, if we go to this next one here, you can see. So ruby throats, they have these feathers on their throat, much like the feathers on, say, a bluebird or a blue jay. They capture the blue part of the light spectrum. And so our eyes perceive that feather as blue. But if you wet that feather, if you put it in different lighting conditions, it does not look blue. It looks kind of black. It's the same with the ruby-throated hummingbird. These feathers capture the light, the available light, in such a way that they look as though they're red. But if it's a cloudy day, if the light is hitting the throat at a different angle, that ruby throat turns black. So I believe there's a species called a black-throated hummingbird that does not occur in the Midwest. If you think you're seeing a black-throated hummingbird, chances are it's a ruby, just at a different angle for the light. Ruby throats also come in plain, shall we say. This could be a female, might be an immature bird. That ruby throat comes in after the first molt on the males. So very cool pictures, Mike. And just these are birds I was talking about them with a group today, and I said I've never heard anybody complain about hummingbirds. There's a lot of other species. I mentioned, blue jays. People always say blue jays are too noisy. And even robins, I heard somebody complaining that we have too many robins and they're nesting on the downspouts. And now the cardinals, they start singing at 4:30 in the morning. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about a hummingbird. So thanks, Mike, for sharing and for taking these wonderful photos, and then also for sharing them. This was a photo a reader sent in, just curious as to what it was that was feeding on her dill. And those of you who are fanciers of caterpillars probably recognize this as a black swallowtail larva. The black swallowtail caterpillar feeds only on plants in the carrot family, also known as the parsley family. So parsley, carrots, dill, cilantro, Queen Anne's lace, all of those plants in that family would be fair game. So that's just something to, be aware of should you be growing those plants. But this is what I wanted to share. This is just the absolute coolest thing. These little structures here, they're called osmeteria, and they pop out when the caterpillar is under duress. In this case, someone was pinching it. But they all the compounds, those plants in the parsley family, they have a pretty strong odor to them. If you can imagine, crushing the leaves of a carrot or and those compounds get concentrated, and they actually come off of these little organs here as a pretty powerful scent. And it's a predator deterrent. There's the shock of these orange things popping up, and then there's the smell that accompanies it. And it's supposed to be pretty effective at keeping these little caterpillars from being eaten. I think that's the end of the slides. We're going to stop the share here. We're going to come back. It's dark out now. Things are, the days are getting a little bit shorter. 2 minutes a day, I think we're losing in terms of daylight, but I noticed we had some chats here. Let's get to those before we sign off for this evening. Let's see, what do we have now? Let's go up to the top. And Laura, Apple Blossom the Possum. That sounds fun too. I might have to
it's actually hysterical. I mean, it starts off with the poor possums, the mom purposely abandons them, you know, because it's time for them to go off, but then things take off a little from
Uh,
there. Um, and I would say it's third, fourth, fifth grade level, but I let the ending, I laugh so hard at. It strays away from what opossums really do, but it's just
well,
very hysterical. I loved it.
Celeste in her nest makes baskets. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, there's a little artistic liberty that's
Yeah,
taken
I'm gonna
there.
have to
But
read that one too.
it's I'll loan it to you, Laura, because it's not only is it well written, but I mean these illustrations are just
Beautiful.
really fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah, and chapter
yeah,
book. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's what we call them in elementary school language. Chapter
And that's
book. I
and
can
that's
read chapter books.
fewer pictures, not still plenty, but some pages with none at all. So
Actually, that's the type of book that kids like third grade, second, third grade age love because they get to look at the beautiful pictures. It entices them in more.
I don't think I ever left that stage. I am sincerely disappointed whenever I open a book and all it is type. But yeah,
I'm still reading Nancy Drew, so I don't.
yeah, yeah. I hear you.
That's so cute.
Well, I'll look that one up too, and maybe we can have
A swap.
an opossum. Thanks,
Sounds
Laura.
good.
Oh, Phil, thank you. I did not know there was a taxidermy. So, the great blue heron was the older or the bird that we'd had longer. The crane was only brought in this spring. The heron has been in the freezer for at least a year and maybe 2 years. The taxidermist looked at it. He said it's still in good shape, so I think we're okay. But I actually talked to the president of the Illinois Taxidermy Association, I think. Um, and so many taxidermists are retiring. Valerie, who I mentioned earlier, she used to run birds down to a taxidermist down near Springfield, and that woman has retired. It's an art that really needs an influx of an injection of new talent because most of these guys are getting to the point where they have to they're done. They've stuffed enough. They're ready to move on. But good to know. I will see if I can find out more information because Caneville's pretty close, a lot closer than Algonquin. Thanks, Phil. Um, is there a decrease of lilies where the dams have been removed? Yes, we do have a bumper crop. You're right, Meredith. And I think like I'm picturing the area down by the South Batavia Dam, which is actually where Rusty Rodeo was held. I'm not sure the lilies. Um, I think they are more. They're increasing the areas in which they grow. I don't know that they are decreasing. I would think, let's flip this a different way. If a dam, say, I don't know that the St. Charles Dam is anywhere near being modified the way, plans have talked about. I think that is still many years off. But if that were to happen, if the silt, um, probably the biggest part of dam modification or removal does involve that silt because so much of it has toxins in it, heavy metals. It generally needs to be scooped out and hauled away, and because letting that amount, because that silt has been backing up for over 100 years, it could really do some damage as it headed downstream and landed in places where it didn't used to be. So I think if the dams are coming out, then some of those massive growths like Boy Scout Island, the backwater area of Boy Scout Island. Boy Scout Island isn't really an island, it's more of a peninsula these days, and that is just full of silt. And it's, from what I've heard, these lilies like a slightly acidic growing medium. And I think that silt is exactly what they've been waiting for. So I don't know that I really answered your question, but I think if the dams were to be removed, I think we would see a decrease because those lilies like quiet water and they like just a a lot of nutrients concentrated in one place, which is what we get when the silt piles up behind a dam. I think I answered that. Tried to anyway. um Dogberry, maybe I misspoke. That's dogwood. So it's the berries of the gray dogwood. And that's different from dogbane, which is another word for dogbane is Indian hemp, which can also proliferate in an area. Rather than little white berries, though, dogbane gets pods, seed pods that have down in them much the way milkweed does. So do tussock moths overwinter? I think they overwinter as cocoons. We were just talking about this this afternoon, not in reference to the tussock moths, but in reference to the Luna moths. There's a member of King County Audubon who has several Luna moth caterpillars that she's looking to find caretakers for. And I think they're at the stage now where they will feed and feed and feed and then spin a cocoon and then spend the winter in that cocoon. So I think tussock moths are the same. I believe they overwinter as cocoons. I'll check on that though, and if it's different, I will let you guys know next week. Are the beavers still at Otter Creek Bend? Yes, there is a tremendous, in fact, as I was walking up to the creek this afternoon, I could hear water rushing and I thought, oh, that can't be, that must be the wind in the cottonwoods, because that, can sometimes sound like water to the waxy leaves hitting each other. But sure enough, because of the rain we had yesterday, Otter Creek is way up. Otter Creek these days is essentially, it's a drainage for all the subdivisions to the north, Thornwood, Stony Creek, all the strip malls and stores that are north of Bose, anything north of Silver Glen, actually. Those storm drains let out into Otter. And so the water was rushing over. There's a really fine beaver dam, maybe, I don't know, 50 yards, not even that far, maybe 50 yards south of the bridge at Otter Creek Bend. And they were just, it was really cool to hear the water cascading over. Did not see any signs of the beavers themselves, but the dam is well maintained. So I think they are still in the area there. And let's see, I texted a video of a soft shell turtle taken early July on the Fox. Oh, looks like a smooth soft shell. I'd like to see that if I could, Phil. I don't know if you could email that to me, but smooth soft shells don't typically occur in this area. The Fox River being the size that it is and having fair amounts of rocky substrate, rocky and sandy substrate. The smooth soft shell likes muddier stream bed. We tend to see those in the muddier rivers that we see in southern Illinois. The spiny soft shell is the one that we usually see around here. Now, a female spiny soft shell, as she gets bigger, she loses the distinct dots that are the pattern on the back that we see on the males and on the smaller the younger turtles. So yeah, if you happen to have a picture, I'd love to take a look at it. There's a couple of things we can look for. A spiny soft shell. They have little bumps on the leading edge of their top shell. They call them tubercles, but they're supposedly how the spiny soft shell got its name. They're not spines at all, but yeah, we could take a look. If somebody got a picture of it, I'd be glad to take a look at that. Okay. Caneville taxidermist. Okay. Yeah, I'll ask around. see if we can find out any more information on that. And it looks like we're at the bottom of the chats, and it looks like we are at the way past the bottom of our hour, 9:15 p.m. It is bedtime, all you good little nature nerds. Thank you, Phil. I'd appreciate that. I'll show that maybe we can take a look at it next week. Got some other things I didn't load into this week's pictures that we will talk about next week as well. So for now, let's say good night. I hope you have a good natured rest of your week, and we'll see you back again next Tuesday. Have a good one,
Thank you,
everybody.
Pam.
Thanks, Meg. Take
Good
care.
night, Pam.
So long.
Thanks, Pam.